Lorna. Lorna never saw the strange young man ever again. Instead, the next time that her dad was unable to pick her up after her Friday shift, it was Scottie who offered to walk her home. Scottie was a good boy. He was also short, slight, and set upon by every bully at school. Scottie was also infatuated with Lorna, although he had yet to ask her out. At 18, Scottie had never had a date. He figured walking Lorna home would be a good first step towards asking her out. It was a beautiful October night. Beautiful. But Lorna wouldn't stop talking about some strange guy who'd been coming into the library. He always wanted the same book, Lorna babbled on, and on, and on, and on. It was called The Book of Werewolves by some minister called Sabine Baring-Gould. It's a very strange old book, and kind of silly, Lorna continued. So I had to read it to find out what was so fascinating about it. Really, Scottie muttered. Some of the stories in there, Lorna gushed, are kind of sick. Elizabeth was 40 years old now, and afraid she was losing both her looks and her husband's affection. As a result, she spent several hours each morning dressing and applying her makeup. One morning, one of her maids had been clumsy and had made a mistake arranging her mistress's headdress, causing an enraged Elizabeth to slam her face so hard she split the maid's lip, making it spurt blood. Some of the blood splattered Elizabeth's face, but when the blood drops were washed off, her skin appeared much more beautiful, whiter and more transparent on those places where the blood had been. Elizabeth formed the resolution to bathe her face and her whole body in human blood so as to enhance her beauty, Lorna lectured Scottie, who found the whole thing rather morbid. But not just any blood. The blood of young virginal women. Elizabeth employed 2 old women and a hunchback named Fitzgo to assist her. Fitzgo would kill the luckless victims, the old women then collecting the blood, which was put into a tub where Elizabeth would bathe at the hour of 4 a.m. After the bath, she appeared more beautiful than ever, or so she thought. Following the death of her husband in 1604, Elizabeth continued to bathe in blood, hoping it would continue to enhance her beauty and her chances of a new husband. Young women were lured to the castle with the promise of work, only to find themselves imprisoned in the dungeon, where they were whipped and tortured. Elizabeth, not infrequently, tortured the victims herself, often changing her clothes, which dripped with blood, before renewing her cruelties. After the bodies had been milked of blood, the remains were burned. Elizabeth's sadism became so great, she would even stick needles into those who sat with her, especially if they were young women. One of her servant girls she stripped naked, smeared her with honey, and so drove her out of the house, and to a horrible death in the forest. Scottie had been listening to this recital in stunned silence. He was astonished to hear Lorna speaking about such things with such glee. "That book is obscene," he sputtered. Lorna continued, as if she hadn't heard him. "They say Elizabeth Bathory was responsible for the murder of 650 young women and girls. Eventually, her outrages were so outrageous, the castle was stormed and the evidence of mass murder found. Fitzko and the old women were burned at the stake, while Elizabeth was walled up alive. In darkness, they left only a small slit in the wall, through which they passed her meals. She lived 3 years that way. 3 years, alone, in the dark, until she too was dead." It took Scottie a moment to realize Lorna had finished talking, but when he did, he blurted, "What a disgusting woman! You know, Lorna, I don't think it's quite healthy to read stuff like that." Lorna chuckled, causing Scottie to look at her sharply. "Do you think I'm beautiful, Scottie? Do you think I'm lovely?" The full moon had risen above the nearby suburban rooftops and caught Lorna's face in its silvery rays. As Scottie stared at her, Lorna's pale complexion began to darken, began to coarsen, and he saw with horror that large patches of thick gray hair were sprouting over her cheeks, covering her acne. Lorna's button nose elongated into a snout, her panting mouth now full of rows of sharp, gleaming teeth as her eyes took on a reddish glare. The chuckle had morphed into a growl, and then Lorna tore out Scottie's throat. In the end, Lorna must have really liked Scottie. In fact, she just ate him up. There was no trial, of course. Lorna was pronounced insane and taken directly to the asylum. When the authorities eventually learned about the Book of Werewolves, they went to the library to examine it. But the book was missing. The end. Are you sure? If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, Werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. Make that 2,022 subs in 2022. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix here. That's PX here. While the music was the classic Ghost Processional by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.